The bedroom was silent, except for the sound of rain against floor-to-ceiling windows. Damien Cross stood frozen at the edge of the bed, staring at the woman who had just become his wife 3 hours ago. Isabelle Laurent, now Isabelle Cross, lay beneath silk sheets with her eyes closed, breathing shallow and quick. Her fingers clutched the fabric so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and he had just discovered something that made absolutely no sense. She was untouched, a virgin, at 35 years old, after a 4-year marriage to another man. Have you ever thought you understood someone, only to discover they were carrying a secret so profound it rewrote everything you believed about them? Damien's world had been built on contracts and calculations, cold logic, strategic moves. He had married Isabelle as a business arrangement, nothing more, a solution to protect both their crumbling empires from a common enemy. No expectations, no emotions, no complications. But as he looked at her now, trembling and vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with trust, he felt something crack open inside his chest, something he thought had died 2 years ago when his first wife destroyed him. This story is about what happens when two broken people make a deal to save themselves and end up saving each other instead. Before we begin, I need to know where in the world you are watching from, and if you have ever made a choice out of desperation that turned into the best decision of your life. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about love, trust, and second chances. This is Twilight Love Tales, and this story will stay with you long after it ends. Now, let us begin. 3 months earlier, Damien Cross sat in his corner office on the 65th floor of the Asherton Tower, staring at photographs that had just destroyed his marriage. His wife of 5 years, Victoria, smiled up at him from glossy prints, but she was not alone. The man beside her was Thomas Crane, Damien's former business partner, the man who had stolen $3 million from their joint venture, the man Damien had spent 18 months prosecuting, and apparently, the man his wife had been sleeping with for the past 2 years. The private investigator had delivered the evidence that morning, bank statements showing regular wire transfers from Victoria's account to offshore holdings, hotel receipts, text messages that made Damien's stomach turn. But worse than the infidelity was the realization that Victoria had been feeding Thomas confidential information from Damien's companies, industrial espionage, wrapped in marriage vows. Damien set the photographs down carefully, precisely, his hands completely steady. He had built a tech empire worth $4 billion by the age of 41. He had negotiated with heads of state, outmaneuvered corporate raiders, survived hostile takeover attempts. He did not break. He did not crumble. He analyzed, strategized, and executed. Victoria came home that evening to find her belongings already packed and divorce papers waiting on the entrance hall table. "What did I do?" she had asked, as if she truly did not know, as if 2 years of betrayal could be erased with wide eyes and manufactured confusion. Damien had looked at her with the same expression he used in boardroom negotiations. "Everything," he said quietly. "You did everything." The divorce was finalized in 43 days. Victoria received the minimum required by their prenuptial agreement. Thomas Crane received a 20-year prison sentence for fraud and corporate espionage. And Damien received confirmation of something he had long suspected. Love was a fairy tale, marriage was a contract, and trust was a weapon people used to destroy you. He would never be vulnerable again. Across the city, in a brownstone overlooking Riverside Park, Isabelle Laurent stood in her home office staring at very different photographs, but they told an equally devastating story. Her husband of 4 years, Gregory Hartwell, sat at a restaurant table with a woman Isabelle had never seen. That alone would have been painful, but survivable. What made it unforgivable was the briefcase on the table between them. The briefcase Isabelle recognized because she had given it to Gregory for their anniversary, and the documents spilling from it bore the classified seal of her father's office. Ambassador Richard Laurent was one of the most respected diplomats in American history. His current assignment involved negotiating a critical trade agreement with the European Union, information worth billions to the right buyer, and Gregory, it seemed, had decided to become that buyer's supplier. Isabelle's hands shook as she scrolled through the investigator's report. Her father had hired the man quietly after noticing irregularities in his security protocols, documents accessed at odd hours, files copied to external drives, and the pattern always traced back to Gregory's visits to the ambassador's residence. Her husband had not just betrayed her personally, he had committed treason. The confrontation happened that same night. Gregory returned home to find Isabel sitting in the dark living room. The evidence spread across the coffee table like accusations made of paper and ink. "I can explain," he had said immediately, which meant he knew exactly what she had discovered. Isabel had looked at him, this man she had married believing he was her partner, her supporter, her safe place. "Really," she said, "explain how you sold my father's career and my trust for money. I am fascinated to hear the justification." Gregory's face had hardened. "Your father's information, your father's connections. Everything in your life belongs to him, Isabel. I was just taking what should have been mine through you." And there it was, the truth beneath 4 years of marriage. He had never loved her. He had loved what she could provide. Access, status, information. She had been a resource to exploit, not a person to cherish. The divorce papers were filed the next morning. But unlike Damien's clean separation, Isabel's situation came with complications. Gregory's crimes had created liability for both her and her father. The people he had sold information to, led by a dangerous power broker named Vincent Moreau, now had leverage. Photographs of meetings that could be misconstrued. Paper trails that suggested Isabel's involvement. The truth would eventually emerge, but in politics, perception often mattered more than reality. Ambassador Laurent had built a 40-year career on integrity. One scandal could end it, and destroy Isabel's reputation in the process, which was why, 2 weeks after her divorce was finalized, Isabel sat across from her father in his private study, listening to a proposal that sounded insane. "There is a way to protect us both," Richard said carefully, "but it requires a sacrifice you may not be willing to make." Isabel had learned in the past month that she was willing to make almost any sacrifice to survive. "Tell me." Her father slid a folder across his desk. Inside was a dossier on Damien Cross, billionaire tech entrepreneur, recent divorce, famously private, and according to the file, in need of something Isabel could provide. "He needs political connections for his European expansion," Richard explained. "Access to diplomatic channels and social networks that his money alone cannot buy. You need protection from Moreau and the fallout from Gregory's actions. Damien has the resources to make both problems disappear." "You are proposing I marry him," Isabel said. "It was not a question. I am proposing a strategic alliance. 2 years, enough time to stabilize both situations. He gets what he needs for his business. You get safety and distance from the scandal. After that, you part ways quietly and rebuild separately." Isabel looked at the photograph in the file. Damien Cross had dark hair going silver at the temples, sharp features and eyes that looked like they had forgotten how to smile. He was handsome, in the way that powerful men often were, as if confidence had been built into his bone structure. "And he has agreed to this?" she asked. "He is reviewing your file now. If you both consent, my attorneys will draft the agreement." Isabel thought about Gregory's betrayal, about the way trust had become a weapon in her hands, about the fact that at 35, she had never actually been in love, just in strategic partnerships that masqueraded as romance. At least this time, everyone would know exactly what they were signing up for. "Arrange a meeting," she said. The Meridian Hotel's penthouse suite occupied the entire top floor, with 360-degree views of Asherton. Isabel arrived at exactly 7 in the evening, dressed in a charcoal suit that projected competence without warmth. This was a business meeting, nothing more. Damien Cross stood by the western windows, his silhouette sharp against the sunset. He turned as she entered, and Isabel felt the full weight of his attention settle on her like a physical thing. The photographs had not captured the intensity of his presence, or the intelligence in his eyes. This was a man who saw everything and forgot nothing. "Miss Laurent," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Cross," Isabel replied, crossing the space between them. She extended her hand. He shook it once, firmly, then released. "Your father has explained the situation," Damien said, gesturing to the sitting area. "I want to establish parameters before we proceed." They sat in leather chairs positioned at precise angles, neither too close nor too far. Professional distance maintained through furniture arrangement. This marriage would be contractual, Damien continued. 2 years minimum. Public appearances as needed to maintain credibility. Private lives remain separate. No interference. No expectations beyond what is outlined in the legal documents. Isabel nodded. I have conditions as well. I would be concerned if you did not. First, complete transparency regarding any business dealings that involve my name or my father's connections. Second, if this arrangement threatens my professional reputation beyond acceptable parameters, I reserve the right to terminate. Third, she paused, then continued. This is strategic only. No expectations of intimacy. Something flickered in Damien's expression. Agreement, perhaps. Or relief. Understood, he said. Though we will need to demonstrate appropriate affection publicly. Society expects certain performances from married couples. I am aware of what convincing looks like. Good. He stood, moving to the bar where a bottle of wine waited. He poured 2 glasses without asking her preference, and returned, handing her one. To honesty, then. Isabel accepted the glass, their fingers brushing briefly. To clarity. They drank, and in the silence that followed, Isabel studied the man who would become her husband. He held himself with the rigid control of someone who had been hurt, and decided never to be vulnerable again. She recognized it because she saw the same armor in her mirror every morning. Can I ask why you are willing to do this? She said. You could hire consultants for European market access. Why marriage? Damien set his glass down with precision. Because consultants can be fired. A wife provides permanent social legitimacy in circles where business alone is insufficient. And because, he met her eyes directly, I have no intention of marrying for emotional reasons again. This arrangement serves my purposes without the liability of feelings. Brutal honesty. Isabel appreciated it, even as it confirmed what she already knew. This man would never love her, which was perfect, because she had no intention of loving him either. When? She asked simply. The contracts will be ready in 1 week. We can schedule the ceremony for 10 days from now. Private, minimal witnesses, efficient. Isabel stood, smoothing her suit. I will have my attorney review the documents, as will I. Damien walked her to the door. Miss Laurent. Isabel. She paused, looking back. I know, this is not what either of us imagined for our lives, he said quietly. But I give you my word that I will honor every term of our agreement. You will be protected, supported, and respected. I may not offer love, but I do offer integrity. Something in Isabel's chest tightened. That is more than my last husband provided. The contract arrived 3 days later. 47 pages of legal precision outlining every aspect of their arrangement. Financial terms, public appearance requirements, conditions for termination. Isabel read it twice. Her attorney read it 3 times, and she signed on page 47 with her hand completely steady. The wedding took place on a Thursday morning at the Asherton Courthouse. Judge Patricia Holbrook, a family friend of the ambassadors, performed the ceremony in a private chamber. Isabel wore an ivory sheath dress that was elegant, but deliberately not bridal. Damien appeared in a navy suit. They spoke traditional vows that meant absolutely nothing and exchanged platinum bands that were just expensive props. When Judge Holbrook pronounced them married, Damien kissed Isabel's cheek, briefly, professionally, without any warmth. It was perfect. Exactly what they had agreed to. The marriage certificate was signed. Photographs were taken for public release. And then they left through separate exits as they had arrived. Isabel Laurent was now Isabel Cross, and she had never felt more alone. The riverside estate sprawled across 4 acres of old-growth forest at the edge of Asherton's most exclusive neighborhood. The main house was all glass and steel and architectural ambition, built to impress rather than comfort. Isabel moved into the West Wing 3 days after the wedding, her belongings filling rooms that felt like museum exhibits. Mrs. Chen, the estate manager, gave her a tour with polite efficiency. Your suite, she said, opening double doors to a bedroom larger than Isabel's entire previous apartment. Mr. Cross occupies the East Wing. The main living areas are shared, though he typically works in his private office and takes meals in the formal dining room at 8 each evening. And breakfast? Isabel asked. Mr. Cross does not eat breakfast. Of course, he did not. Damien Cross probably considered food an inefficient use of time. The schedule went up on the refrigerator the next morning. Monday and Wednesday evenings, Damien had board meetings that ran late. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Isabel had venture capital portfolio reviews. Fridays, they were both expected at various social obligations. Weekends were theoretically free, though Damien seemed to travel most Saturdays. They functioned like the world's most efficient roommates. Paths that never quite crossed. Conversations that never went beyond logistics. "The gallery opening this Saturday requires formal attire," Damien would say in passing. "I will be ready by 7. Thank you." "You are welcome." And that would be the extent of their interaction for the day. Isabel told herself this was exactly what she wanted. No emotional complications, no vulnerability, no risk of being hurt again. The arrangement was working perfectly, except late at night, when she lay alone in her enormous bed. She sometimes wondered what it would be like to have a real marriage, not Gregory's version, which had been exploitation disguised as partnership, but actual intimacy. Someone to talk to about more than schedules and appearances. Someone who saw her as more than a useful connection. She dismissed the thoughts as quickly as they arrived. Fairy tales were for people who had not learned yet how much damage trust could do. The first crack in their careful distance came 6 weeks into the marriage. The Asherton Foundation Gala was the social event of the autumn season, attended by everyone who mattered in business, politics, and old money circles. Isabel and Damien arrived together in his car, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they walked the red carpet. Cameras flashed. Reporters called questions. They smiled appropriately and said nothing of substance. Inside the Peninsula Hotel's grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers threw light across 500 guests dressed in their most expensive armor. Isabel wore deep emerald silk that brought out the amber in her eyes. Damien's tuxedo was custom-tailored perfection. They looked, Isabel thought, like exactly what they were supposed to be. A powerful couple. Polished. Untouchable. Fake. Ambassador Harrison approached with his wife Margaret, both wearing diplomatic smiles that never quite reached their eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Cross," the ambassador said warmly. "Congratulations on your marriage. We were delighted by the news." "Thank you, Ambassador," Isabel replied smoothly, slipping into the role she had been trained for since childhood. "Margaret, that necklace is extraordinary." The conversation flowed through the predictable channels, compliments and careful questions, references to mutual acquaintances. Nothing substantive said in 3 full minutes of talking. It was a performance they had all mastered. As the Harrisons moved away, Damien leaned close to Isabel's ear. "Senator Blackwell at 3 o'clock, he murmured, approaching with intent. Isabel did not turn her head. "He wants an introduction to your cybersecurity division. His daughter's firm is developing blockchain voting systems." Damien's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You have done your homework." "Always." The senator arrived. The introduction was made, and another strategic connection was forged. This, Isabel realized, was what they did well together. The professional choreography of mutual benefit. It felt natural, almost comfortable, like dancing with a partner who anticipated your every move. When the orchestra began playing, couples drifted toward the dance floor in clusters of silk and wool. Damien turned to Isabel, extending his hand. "Shall we?" For appearances, Isabel hesitated for only a heartbeat before accepting. "Of course." His hand settled at her waist as hers came to rest on his shoulder. They moved into the waltz with surprising synchronization, as if they had practiced this dance before rather than performing it for the first time. Damien led with quiet confidence, his hold steady and sure. "You dance well," Isabel observed. "Boarding school requirement," he replied. "You, private lessons from age 7. My mother believed social graces were survival tools." She was not wrong. Damien guided her through a turn, his grip firm without being controlling. "Though I suspect you have developed other forms of protection since then." Isabel met his eyes, finding them closer than she had realized. "We all have." The music swelled around them, violins and cellos creating something almost romantic. For a moment, just a moment, Isabel allowed herself to forget the contract in the safe at home. In this space, they were not strategic partners, but simply 2 people moving together, and there was something unexpectedly peaceful about it. "Isabel," Damien said quietly, his voice different somehow, softer. "Yes, I realize this arrangement was not what either of us imagined for our lives, but I want you to know, He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I am grateful for your professionalism, your discretion. It makes this bearable. Something in Isabel's chest tightened, an emotion she could not quite name. Bearable seems like a low bar. His smile was rueful. Perhaps, but these past weeks I have found myself thinking that if I had to enter another strategic marriage, I am glad it is with someone I respect. The song ended before Isabel could respond, couples around them breaking apart to polite applause. But as she stepped back from Damien's embrace, she felt the ghost of his words lingering like warmth against her skin. Respect. It was more than she'd had in her first marriage, more perhaps than she had expected from this one. The evening continued through more conversations, more networking, more performances of marital contentment, but something had shifted, subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. When Damien's hand found hers between conversations, the gesture felt less calculated. When she laughed at one of his dry observations about a pompous tech investor, the sound was genuine. They were acting. Of course they were acting, but the line between performance and reality had begun to blur. Have you ever started something for purely practical reasons, only to discover it was becoming personal? If this story is already pulling at something in your heart, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me if you have ever been surprised by your own feelings. Because what happens next in Damien and Isabel's story will show you that sometimes the strongest walls fall the fastest when the right person applies the right pressure. Late that night, after they had returned to the estate and changed into comfortable clothes, Isabel found herself in the library. It was a room she rarely used but loved for its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. She stood wrapped in a cashmere robe, watching moonlight silver the water's surface, when a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Damien entered carrying 2 glasses of wine, still in his dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere along the way. Thought you might want this, he said, offering her a glass. Thank you, Isabel accepted, surprised. Cannot sleep. Rarely can after events like that. The performance aspect is exhausting. He moved to stand beside her at the window, maintaining careful distance. You handled it beautifully tonight. I know it was not easy. Neither was it for you. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping wine, watching the river flow past in its eternal journey toward the sea. Outside, wind stirred the trees, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Can I ask you something personal? Isabel heard herself say. Damien glanced at her. You can ask. I will decide whether to answer. Your first marriage. What happened? A long pause. Then, I worked too much. Cared too little about the things she needed. By the time I realized she was unhappy, she had already left, physically and emotionally. He turned the wine glass in his hands. I do not blame her. I was a terrible husband, but a successful businessman. Yes, because that is where I put my energy, my attention, everything I had. His voice carried no self-pity, only observation. I learned that I am not built for traditional relationships. Too focused, too controlled. So I stopped trying. Isabel studied his profile in the moonlight. And this arrangement. It works for you because it does not require what you cannot give. Exactly. He met her eyes. What about you? What made you willing to try again after Gregory? She had known the question would come eventually. Still, answering required excavating truths she had buried deep. I realized I had married an illusion, she said finally. Not a person, but the idea of partnership, security, someone to share the weight of ambition with. She laughed quietly, bitterly. Turns out, he was doing the same, marrying my connections, not me. So this time, you are choosing honesty over illusion. Yes, at least we both know exactly what this is. Damien nodded slowly, something like understanding passing between them. To honesty, then. He raised his glass. Isabel touched hers, to his, to honesty. They drank, and in the silence that followed, Isabel felt something settle in her chest. Not quite contentment, but perhaps acceptance. This marriage would never be traditional, would never be love, but it offered something rarer, transparency. 2 people who had stopped pretending they needed what they could not give. Good night, Isabel, Damien said, setting down his empty glass. Good night. He left as quietly as he'd arrived, and Isabel returned to watching the river, alone, but somehow less lonely than she had been in months. The security breach happened on a Tuesday. Isabel was in her downtown office reviewing quarterly reports when her phone buzzed with an alert from the estate's security system. Unauthorized vehicle detected on perimeter road. She frowned, pulling up the camera feeds on her laptop. A black SUV with tinted windows sat idling just beyond the main gate. No license plates visible. Her stomach dropped. She called Damien immediately. "There is a car outside the estate." "I see it," he said, his voice tight. "I am pulling the feeds now. Stay where you are, Damien." "Isabel." His tone shifted, becoming something harder, colder. "Stay in your office. I am sending security to you now." The SUV disappeared before police arrived, but the message was clear. Someone knew where they lived, and that someone wanted them to know they were being watched. Vincent Moreau. It had to be. The power broker who had purchased stolen information from Gregory was apparently not content to let sleeping dogs lie. He wanted leverage, and he had decided Isabel was a vulnerability worth exploiting. Damien arrived at her office within the hour, flanked by 2 private security operatives. "We are leaving," he said without preamble. "Both of us. Now. Where?" "Somewhere Moreau cannot reach you." The lake house was 2 hours north of Asherton, nestled into pine forest at the edge of a private mountain lake. Isabel had never seen it before, had not even known Damien owned it. The structure was smaller than the riverside estate, all stone and timber and windows that framed the water like living paintings. It was beautiful, and more importantly, it was secure. Damien's security team swept the property, installed additional cameras, and established a perimeter. "No one gets within a quarter mile without us knowing," the team leader assured them. Isabel stood on the deck overlooking the lake, arms wrapped around herself despite the warm evening. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. It should have been peaceful. Instead, she felt like prey. Damien emerged from the house carrying a blanket, which he draped over her shoulders without asking. "You are safe here. For how long?" Isabel turned to face him. "Moreau will not stop, because we ran." "No, but it buys us time to neutralize him properly." Damien leaned against the railing beside her, closer than he usually stood. "I have investigators gathering evidence, legal teams preparing cases. Moreau built his empire on secrets and leverage. We are going to dismantle it piece by piece, and if he comes after us first, he will not." Damien's voice carried absolute certainty, "because he knows that if anything happens to you, I will devote every resource I have to destroying him. Money, connections, legal power, all of it focused on one target." Isabel stared at him. "Why? Why what? Why would you do that? I am not actually your wife, not in any real sense." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the darkening lake. "You are legally my wife. That creates responsibility. And beyond that," he paused, then continued softly, "I do not abandon people who depend on me. Not anymore." There was a story there, Isabel could tell, pain buried beneath pragmatism. "What happened?" she asked gently. "My father left when I was 8, Damien said, his voice carefully neutral. "Walked away from my mother and me because responsibility became inconvenient. I watched her work 3 jobs trying to keep us afloat while he started a new family across the country." He looked at Isabel then, something raw in his expression. "I swore I would never be that kind of man, the kind who walks away when things get difficult. You are not responsible for me. According to the state of New York and a signed contract, I absolutely am." His mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. "But beyond legalities, Isabel, you are in danger because of an arrangement I agreed to. That makes your safety my responsibility, regardless of how we define this relationship." Isabel felt tears threatening, the first she had allowed since Gregory's betrayal. "You are a better man than you give yourself credit for." Damien reached up, surprising them both, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "Or perhaps you simply have very low standards after Gregory." She laughed despite herself, the sound breaking the tension. "Probably both." They stood like that as darkness fell, his hand still touching her face, her heart beating too fast in her chest. The air between them felt charged, different, like something hovering on the edge of changing forever. "We should go inside," Damien said quietly. but he did not move. Yes, Isabel did not move either. Isabel, Damien, if we cross certain lines, there is no going back to the original agreement. I know, this could complicate everything. I know. His thumb traced along her jaw, a touch so gentle it made her breath catch. We agreed to keep this simple. We did. So why does this feel anything but simple? Because, Isabel whispered, we are both liars. About what? About not wanting this to be real. Damien's eyes widened slightly, and then he was kissing her. Not the polite cheek kiss from their wedding, or the performative touches at public events, but a real kiss. Deep and searching and full of months of denied attraction. His hand slid into her hair. Hers gripped his shoulders, and for the first time since signing the contract, Isabel let herself feel. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. This is dangerous. Everything worthwhile is. Isabel, stop thinking, she said, and kissed him again. They made it inside, barely. Damien's hands shook slightly as he locked the door, and Isabel found that tremor more erotic than any smooth confidence could have been. This mattered to him. She mattered. The master bedroom overlooked the lake. Windows opened to let in the sound of water against shore and whined through pines. Damien lit a fire in the stone fireplace, and the room filled with flickering warmth. Then he turned to Isabel, and his expression was so open, so vulnerable, that she almost could not breathe. Are you certain? He asked. Yes, because we can stop. We can pretend this did not happen and go back to Damien. Isabel crossed to him, placing her palm against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. I do not want to go back. I want this. I want you. He kissed her again, slower this time, reverent. His hands traced down her sides, learning her shape through fabric before finding the zipper of her dress. It fell away like a secret being revealed. She stood before him in silk undergarments, and his sharp intake of breath made her feel powerful and desirable, and seen in a way she never had before. You are so beautiful, he whispered. Isabel reached for his shirt, fingers working buttons with increasing urgency. Your turn. He helped her, and then they were skin to skin, the contact electric. Damien lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed, laying her down like she was something precious. He followed her down, his weight settling over her, and Isabel wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer. His mouth explored her neck, her collarbone, the curve of her breast. Every touch was careful, deliberate, as if he were memorizing her. Isabel arched into him, her hands mapping the muscles of his back, the surprising softness of his hair, and then his hand slid lower, and he froze. Isabel. His voice had changed, confusion mixed with wonder. She opened her eyes to find him staring at her with an expression she could not read. What? She breathed. You. His hand remained where it was, and understanding dawned in his eyes. Isabel. Have you ever? No. The single word hung between them like a confession. But you were married for 4 years. Yes. And Gregory never? No. Isabel felt heat flood her face. He had problems and affairs. Our marriage was never. She could not finish the sentence. Damien pulled back slightly, his entire body tense. Why did you not tell me? Because it is humiliating. Because I am 35 years old and should not still be. She turned her face away. Because it made me feel broken. Damien's hand came to her chin, gently turning her back to face him. His eyes were fierce. You are not broken. He is the one who was broken. What kind of man does not? One who never wanted me, Isabel whispered. One who only wanted my connections. Damien's expression transformed into something almost painful. Then he was a fool beyond measure. And you? Isabel searched his face. Are you disappointed? Disappointed. Damien laughed, the sound ragged. Isabel, I am terrified. This is. You are giving me something. His voice cracked slightly. This matters. It changes everything. Does it have to? Yes. He kissed her softly. Because I refuse to treat this casually. You deserve better than that. You deserve someone who understands the gift you are offering. Then understand it and accept it. Isabel pulled him back down. Please, Damien. I trust you. I choose you. Something in his eyes broke and reformed into determination. Then I will make certain you never regret that choice. What followed was slow and careful. and achingly tender. Damien took his time, his hands and mouth worshipping every inch of her skin until Isabel was trembling with need. When he finally pressed inside her, the sharp sting made her gasp, but he stilled immediately, his face buried in her neck. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe. I have you." Isabel clung to him, adjusting to the unfamiliar sensation. It hurt, but beneath the discomfort was something else. Fullness, connection, the feeling of not being alone inside her own skin. Damien moved carefully, watching her face for any sign of pain. His control was absolute, every motion measured and deliberate, and gradually the discomfort faded into something warmer, something building. "Okay," she whispered. Okay. Tell me what you need. More, please, Damien. More." He kissed her deeply and began to move with more purpose. Isabel wrapped herself around him, matching his rhythm, and suddenly she understood why people wrote poetry about this. It was not just physical, it was emotional, soul deep. Two people becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. When the climax hit, Isabel cried out, her entire body arching. Damien followed moments later, his control finally breaking as he buried himself deep and shuddered against her. They collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts racing in tandem. Damien rolled to his side, pulling her with him so they remained connected. His hand stroked her hair, her back, soothing touches that made Isabel's eyes burn with unexpected tears. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "Yes." She pressed her face against his chest. "More than all right. Did I hurt you? A little, but it was worth it." Damien tilted her face up, his expression serious. "Thank you for trusting me with that. With you." Isabel kissed him gently. "Thank you for making it beautiful." They lay tangled together as the fire burned low and moonlight replaced the glow of flames. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate for what had just shifted between them. The contract marriage had become something real, something neither of them had planned for or protected themselves against, something terrifying and perfect, and absolutely undeniable. Can you imagine discovering that the person you married for protection became the person you could not imagine living without? If this story is making you believe in second chances and unexpected love, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Twilight Love Tales, because this journey is far from over. In fact, the real complications are just beginning. Morning came with golden light streaming through windows and birdsong replacing the night's silence. Isabel woke slowly, her body sore in unfamiliar ways, wrapped in warmth. It took her a moment to remember where she was and why she ached. Then Damien's arm tightened around her waist and everything came flooding back. They had crossed the line, shattered the careful boundaries, made the contract marriage into something real and complicated and irreversible. "Good morning," Damien's voice rumbled against her ear, rough with sleep. "Morning." Isabel turned in his embrace to face him. His hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and he looked more human than she had ever seen him. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "No." The answer came without hesitation. None." He kissed her forehead. "Though I suspect we should discuss what this means for our arrangement. Our arrangement just became significantly more complicated." "Agreed, but not necessarily in a bad way." Damien's thumb traced patterns on her shoulder. "Unless you want to pretend last night did not happen. Could we, even if we wanted to?" "Probably not." He smiled, and the expression transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "I have a confession." Isabel braced herself. "What?" "I have wanted to do that since the gala. Watching you in that green dress, laughing and brilliant, and completely unaware of how extraordinary you are. It took everything I had to maintain proper distance. You hid it well. Years of practice at hiding what I feel. But with you, Isabel, the armor does not work as well as it should." "Good." Isabel kissed him. "I like you better without armor." They spent the day at the lake house, deliberately not discussing Moreau or security threats or anything that existed beyond the property line. Instead, they talked, really talked. For the first time since signing the contract, Damien told her about building his company from nothing, working 18-hour days in a basement office, eating ramen, and believing he could change the world through code. Isabel told him about her early career, fighting for credibility in rooms full of men who saw her last name before they saw her competence. They cooked together, Damien surprisingly skilled with a knife, Isabel utterly hopeless with spices. They laughed when she oversalted the pasta. He kissed sauce from her lips. They ate on the deck as the sun set, and it felt like a real marriage, the kind Isabel had stopped believing existed. "Can I ask you something?" Isabel said as stars began appearing overhead. "Of course. What happens when we go back to reality?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "I suppose that depends on what you want. What I want feels dangerous to admit, more dangerous than what we have already done. Yes, because what they had done was physical. Emotional vulnerability was an entirely different risk. "Try me," Damien said gently. Isabel took a breath. "I want this to be real. Not just the physical intimacy, but actual partnership. I want to stop sleeping in separate wings. Stop scheduling our lives around avoiding each other. I want," she faltered, then pushed forward, "I want to try being actually married." Damien reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then that is what we will do. Just like that. Just like that." He squeezed her fingers. "Isabel, our arrangement was designed to protect us both from vulnerability, but somewhere along the way, you stopped being a contract and started being someone I care about. Someone I want to know better, build something with, even though we started as a business transaction. Especially because of that, we chose each other deliberately, made vows knowing exactly what we were getting. No illusions or romantic delusions, just two people deciding to trust each other." He smiled. "That is a stronger foundation than most marriages have." Isabel felt something unlock in her chest, a weight she had been carrying since Gregory's betrayal finally lifting. "You really mean that? I do not say things I do not mean. No, you really do not." She stood, moving around the table to sit in his lap. "Which is one of many reasons I am falling in love with you." Damien's arms came around her immediately, his face buried in her hair. "Thank God," he breathed, "because I've been falling for weeks and trying to convince myself it was just attraction." They kissed under the stars, and it tasted like promises, like choosing each other again, but this time with full knowledge of what that choice meant. When they returned to Asherton 3 days later, it was as genuinely married people for the first time. Isabel moved her belongings from the West Wing to Damien's suite in the East. They merged their morning routines and evening schedules. Mrs. Chen updated her files with barely concealed satisfaction, as if she had known all along that the arrangement would become real, and for several weeks, life was shockingly peaceful. But Vincent Moreau had not forgotten them, and he was about to make a move that would test their new bond in ways neither could have anticipated. Isabel discovered she was pregnant on a rainy Tuesday in October. She had missed her period and attributed it to stress. But when the exhaustion did not fade and coffee started making her nauseous, she purchased a test at a pharmacy across town where no one would recognize her. 2 lines appeared almost instantly. She sat on the bathroom floor of her downtown office, staring at the positive test, her mind unable to process what it meant. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With Damien's child. From that first night at the lake house. This was not part of the contract. They had used protection that night. Had not they? She tried to remember through the haze of passion, and realized with sinking certainty that they had not. Both too caught up in the moment to think about consequences. And now there were consequences. Growing inside her, Isabel's first instinct was panic. This would complicate everything. Their careers, their still new relationship, the arrangement that was supposed to be temporary but had transformed into something neither of them fully understood yet. Her second instinct was unexpected. Joy, small and tentative, but undeniably there. A child. Damien's child. Their child. She called Dr. Rachel Kim, her private physician, and made an appointment for the following day. Then she went home early, claiming a headache, and lay on the bed she now shared with Damien, trying to figure out how to tell him. "Hey, remember when we agreed this was just strategic?" Well, surprise. That seemed insufficient for news that would change their entire lives. Damien arrived home around 7, calling her name as he entered. "Isabel, are you feeling better?" She emerged from the bedroom to find him in the hallway, his tie loosened, concern on his face. "We need to talk," she said. His expression shifted immediately to something guarded. That phrase never precedes good news. It is not bad news. Exactly. Just complicated news. Damien led her to the living room, sitting beside her on the couch with the careful attention he gave important negotiations. "Tell me." Isabel took his hand, needing the contact. "I am pregnant." Silence. Complete and absolute. Damien stared at her, his face cycling through shock and disbelief, and something that might have been fear. "That is not possible," he said finally. "Clearly it is, since I have a positive test upstairs." "No, I mean..." Damien stood abruptly, pacing. "Isabel, I am infertile. My ex-wife and I tried for 2 years before she left. The doctors confirmed it. Low motility. Poor morphology. They said my chances of conceiving naturally were less than 3%. Isabel's breath caught. "You never told me that." It did not seem relevant to our arrangement. He stopped pacing, looking at her with dawning wonder mixed with terror. "Are you certain?" "I am seeing Dr. Kim tomorrow to confirm, but home tests are rarely wrong." Damien sank back onto the couch, his hands gripping his knees. "A baby. Yes. Mine. Yes." He turned to her, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Isabel, do you understand what this means? That our lives are about to get significantly more complicated? That you are giving me something I was told I could never have?" His voice cracked. "A family. An actual family." Isabel felt her own tears spilling over. "You want this. Want it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I want this more than I have words to express. If you want it, I do. I really do." They held each other, crying and laughing, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the unexpected gift they had somehow created together. The appointment the next day confirmed what Isabel already knew. She was 6 weeks pregnant. Everything looked healthy. Dr. Kim scheduled follow-up appointments and provided prenatal vitamins and congratulated them with genuine warmth. Damien held Isabel's hand through the entire visit, his grip almost painful. When they left the clinic, he pulled her into a quiet corner of the parking garage and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for this miracle. We made it together. Still, thank you." The pregnancy changed everything. Damien became almost comically protective, insisting Isabel cut her work hours, installing security updates at both the estate and her office, reading pregnancy books with the same focused intensity he brought to business contracts. Isabel found it simultaneously endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she informed him when he tried to carry her up the stairs. "Humor me," he replied, not setting her down. "You are ridiculous. Probably, but you love me anyway." And she did, completely. The man who had been too controlled for emotional connection had become utterly undone by impending fatherhood. He talked to her stomach every night, telling their child stories about his day, making promises about the future they would build together. For several weeks, they existed in a bubble of happiness, planning, preparing, falling deeper in love with each passing day. And then Vincent Moreau reminded them that threats do not disappear just because you stop paying attention. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered to Isabel's office by courier. Inside were photographs, her and Damien entering the lake house, leaving the clinic, shopping for baby furniture, and a note in precise handwriting. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, Mrs. Cross. It would be tragic if something compromised your health or the child's. Let us discuss how to ensure everyone's safety. Dinner tomorrow at Marcello's, 8 p.m. Come alone." Isabel's hands shook as she called Damien. "We have a problem." He arrived within 20 minutes, his face darkening as he read the note. "You are not going. If I do not, he will escalate. Isabel, this is a direct threat against you and our child. I am not letting you walk into that, so what do we do? Hide forever? No." Damien pulled out his phone. "We end this. Now." What followed was a masterclass in leveraging power. Damien made 3 calls. The first to his head of security, who immediately began tracking the courier. The second to his legal team, who started pulling every piece of information ever compiled on Vincent Moreau. The third to Ambassador Laurent, who quietly activated his own network of contacts. Within 48 hours, they had enough evidence to bury Moreau 10 times over. Shell companies laundering money through legitimate businesses, bribery of public officials, tax evasion, and critically, communications proving he had orchestrated Gregory's initial theft of classified information. Damien presented it all to federal prosecutors in a private meeting. He did not ask for favors or special treatment. He simply provided evidence and let the law do its work. The indictment came down on Tuesday. Vincent Moreau was arrested at his office, charged with 17 federal crimes. The news coverage was immediate and brutal. Asherton's most connected power broker led away in handcuffs. Isabel watched the footage from the safety of the estate, Damien's arm around her shoulders. "It is over," he said quietly. "Is it? Men like Moreau have contingencies, not this time." Damien turned her to face him. He leveraged Gregory's crimes to create his power base. Without that foundation, his entire network collapses. And even if he tries to retaliate from prison, he will find that threatening my family was the worst miscalculation of his life. "Your family," Isabel repeated, smiling. "My family." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "You and this child are mine to protect. Anyone who threatens you will learn exactly how ruthless I can be." Isabel kissed him, my fierce protector. Always. The 12-week ultrasound fell on a bright November morning. Isabel lay on the examination table, Damien beside her, both staring at the monitor as Dr. Kim moved the transducer across gel-covered skin. "There," Dr. Kim said, pointing, "and there, and, oh." "What?" Isabel asked, her heart suddenly pounding. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong. Just," Dr. Kim smiled widely, "you are having triplets." The room went silent, except for the sound of 3 distinct heartbeats echoing from the monitor. "Triplets," Damien repeated, his voice faint. 3 babies, all healthy, all developing perfectly. Dr. Kim adjusted the screen. "You can see them here. Baby A, Baby B, and Baby C." Isabel could not breathe. Three tiny humans, 3 lives depending on her. "That explains the severe nausea," Dr. Kim continued cheerfully, "and the rapid weight gain. Triplets often present with more intense symptoms." 3, Isabel whispered. Damien's hand found hers, gripping tight. 3 miracles, he said softly. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing. 3 babies meant triple everything. Triple joy, triple responsibility, triple fear. When they arrived at the estate, Damien helped Isabel from the car with exaggerated care. She laughed despite her shock. "You realize I can still walk. For now. Soon, you will be carrying 3 humans. I am practicing my support skills." They settled in the living room, the ultrasound photos spread on the coffee table between them. 3 fuzzy images. 3 beating hearts. 3 impossible gifts. "Are you scared?" Isabel asked. "Terrified," Damien admitted. "I was told I could never have 1 child. Now we are having 3. The universe apparently has a sense of humor, or faith, in us." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Can we do this?" Isabel took his hand. "Together, yes. Separately, we would probably fail spectacularly. But together, we can handle anything. Even 3 infants simultaneously screaming. Even that." Damien pulled her close, his hand resting on her stomach where 3 lives were growing. "I love you," he said. "All 4 of you. We love you too." The pregnancy progressed with the expected complications of multiples. Isabel was put on modified bed rest at 24 weeks. Damien worked from home, his office relocated to the room adjacent to their bedroom so he was never far away. He became an expert at anticipating her needs. Ginger tea appeared before she asked. Pillows were adjusted without prompting. He read to her in the evenings. Everything from business journals to poetry, his voice a constant comfort. The nursery took shape slowly. 3 cribs arranged in a careful triangle, walls painted soft yellow with white accents, a rocking chair by the window where Damien would sit, talking to the babies through Isabel's stomach, telling them about the world they would soon enter. Names were chosen after weeks of discussion. If all boys, if all girls, if a mix, they settled on names that meant something. Helena for strength, Caleb for devotion, Mateo for gift of God. At 34 weeks, Isabel's blood pressure spiked. Dr. Kim made the decision. "We need to deliver now." The operating room was cold and bright. Isabel lay on the table, a curtain separating her from the surgery happening below. Damien sat beside her head in full surgical gear, his hand gripping hers, his eyes locked on her face. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know, but you are the strongest person I have ever met, and I am right here. I am not going anywhere." The first cry came at 7:42 a.m. "Baby A," Dr. Kim announced. "It is a girl." "Helena," Isabel breathed. Damien's eyes filled with tears. 7:44 a.m. "Baby B." "A boy." Caleb. 7:46 a.m. "Baby C." Another boy. Mateo. 3 voices filled the room, and Damien openly wept, his forehead pressed against Isabel's. "You did it," he said brokenly. "You brought them here." "We did," Isabel corrected, tears streaming down her own face. "We did it together." The babies were placed on her chest one at a time, tiny and perfect and absolutely real. Helena, with dark hair like Damien's. Caleb, with Isabel's nose. Mateo with a determined cry that suggested a strong personality. Damien touched each of them with trembling fingers, his face transformed by wonder. "Our family," he said. "Our impossible, beautiful family." 6 months later, the Riverside estate had transformed into something unrecognizable from the cold museum it had been when Isabel first arrived. Toys littered the living room. Baby swings occupied the sunroom. The sound of infant laughter and crying echoed through hallways that had once been silent. Isabel sat in the backyard on a warm June afternoon, Helena in her lap, watching Damien attempt to entertain the boys on a blanket. Caleb had discovered rolling and was determined to escape. Mateo was focused on eating his own feet. Damien looked slightly overwhelmed and completely happy. "You are excellent at this," Isabel called. "I am terrible at this," Damien corrected, scooping up Caleb before he rolled into the garden. "But I am trying. Trying is all that matters." Mrs. Chen appeared with lemonade and a knowing smile. "Mr. Cross, you have a conference call in 15 minutes. "Cancel it," Damien said without looking up. "I am busy." Isabel laughed. "Who are you, and what have you done with my workaholic husband?" He grinned at her. "Your workaholic husband discovered that babies are more important than quarterly earnings. Revolutionary concept, I know." Ambassador Laurent joined them for dinner that evening. His relationship with Isabel fully healed. Watching Damien feed Mateo while simultaneously reading a contract, the ambassador shook his head in amazement. "When I suggested this arrangement, I never imagined it would turn into this." "Neither did we," Isabel said, smiling at her husband across the table. "But I am grateful it did," the ambassador continued. "You are happy, genuinely happy. I have not seen you like this since you were a child." "I did not know I could feel like this," Isabel admitted. "Safe and loved and part of something bigger than myself." Later that night, after the babies were asleep and the house was quiet, Isabel found Damien in the nursery. He stood by the cribs, watching their children sleep, his expression soft in the dim light. "You do this every night," she said from the doorway. "I know." He did not turn around. I need to see them. Confirm they are real, that this is real." Isabel crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "It is real. We are real. I spent so many years convinced I was broken," Damien said quietly, incapable of the kind of connection other people had. "And then you showed up with your intelligence and strength and hidden vulnerability, and suddenly, I was not broken anymore. I was just waiting for the right person." Isabel rested her cheek against his back. "I felt the same, like I had to choose between being strong and being loved. Gregory taught me that vulnerability was weakness. You taught me it was strength." Damien turned in her arms, cupping her face. "I love you, Isabel Cross, more than I thought possible. More than I have words for. I love you too." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me in. Thank you for seeing past my armor." They stood in the nursery, wrapped in each other, listening to their children breathe. Outside, stars filled the sky. Inside, their home was full of life and love, and the kind of happiness neither had believed they deserved. So let me ask you this. Have you ever made a choice that seemed practical at the time, but turned into the greatest blessing of your life? Have you ever built something real from a foundation of strategy and necessity? If this story has touched something in you, if it has reminded you that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, then I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. telling me about a time you were surprised by joy, a moment when something started as one thing and became something infinitely better. Because that is what this story is really about. Not just romance, but transformation. Not just love, but choosing to be vulnerable, even when everything in your past tells you it is dangerous. Here is what Isabel and Damien learned, and what I hope you take away from their journey. First, healing is possible, even after devastating betrayal. Both of them came into their arrangement broken and convinced they could never trust again, but they discovered that the right person does not heal your wounds. They create a safe space where you can heal yourself. Second, vulnerability is not weakness. It is the ultimate courage. Isabel trusted Damien with her body, her heart, her future. He trusted her with his deepest fears and hidden dreams. That mutual vulnerability became the foundation of something unshakable. Third, family is not always what you plan. It is what you build. They were supposed to have a temporary arrangement. Instead, they built a real marriage. They were not supposed to have children at all. And they were blessed with 3. The best things in life rarely follow the plan. Fourth, love is a choice, not just a feeling. Damien and Isabel could have kept their relationship transactional. They chose to let it become real. They chose vulnerability over safety. They chose each other, deliberately and repeatedly, even when it would have been easier to maintain distance. And finally, your past does not define your future unless you let it. Both of them carried scars from previous relationships. Those scars made them cautious, but they did not let the past rob them of the possibility of something beautiful in the present. This is the message I want you to carry with you. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are not defined by what someone else did to you or how they failed to see your worth. The right person will not fix you because you do not need fixing. They will simply recognize what was always there: strength, beauty, worth. And when that person appears, often when you least expect it, and in the most unlikely circumstances, you will have a choice. You can protect yourself with walls and contracts and careful distance. Or you can be brave. You can choose vulnerability. You can build something real. Damien and Isabel started with a contract. They built a family. They started with strategy. They found love. They started protecting themselves from pain. And they discovered that the only way to truly live is to risk being hurt by opening yourself to connection. So if this story has moved you, if it has made you believe that second chances are real and that love can emerge from the most unlikely beginnings, then do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story is not over, that the best chapters might still be unwritten. And subscribe to Twilight Love Tales, because every week we bring you stories that prove love is worth fighting for, worth risking for, worth choosing even when your past tells you to run. And most importantly, leave me a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me about the time you took a risk on love, or trust, or vulnerability. Tell me about the moment you discovered that what you thought was an ending was actually a beginning. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. This is Twilight Love Tales, reminding you that sometimes the best love stories start with the worst circumstances. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on broken pieces. And sometimes, when two people brave enough to be vulnerable find each other, they create something that was worth every moment of pain it took to get there. Until next time, remember this: you are worthy of love. You are capable of healing. And your story, whatever it is, whatever pain you are carrying, is not over. The best is yet to come. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for believing, even when it is hard, that love is real and worth pursuing. Now go out there and write your own unexpected love story. I believe in you.